Chapter 71 A Small Fly. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You should meet my friend, Darkfire said, speaking to the two pretty girls standing in front of him. He's a master swordsman from the east. Aaron groaned in discomfort. He was sitting in a chair in the tavern, trying very hard not to be noticed as he drank his ale. The entire night had been like this. They had already visited a handful of taverns, each filled with young people who were hoping to join the Shadowflame Society, and in each tavern, the story was much the same. The moment they entered, the girls' eyes would turn toward Darkfire's handsome face. To Aaron, it was like watching moths being drawn to a lantern. Girls would constantly approach Darkfire, adoring smiles on their faces, giggling as they spoke to him. Darkfire, seemingly intent on being a good friend, kept trying to steer girls Aaron's way, talking up his martial prowess and exotic origins. Although Aaron appreciated the effort, all it did was make him uncomfortable. It wasn't that he was completely unused to female attention. Back in Riverbend, he'd occasionally stolen a kiss or two from some of the girls in town during festivals, but this was different. So you're a master swordsman, then? One of the girls, a beauty with light brown skin and black hair, directed her attention to Aaron. Aaron shrugged. I wouldn't call myself a master, he said truthfully. You're so modest, the girl said with a giggle. Maybe you could give me a few lessons. I already have someone, Aaron responded, stumbling over the words even as he spoke them. Instantly, a hard expression appeared on the girl's pretty face. I was just asking for some lessons. Don't be so presumptuous. She gave him an annoyed glare, then turned around and walked off, leaving Aaron behind. He drained his ale in a single swig, the mug covering his flustered face. So, do you? Darkfire asked, sitting down next to Aaron and handing him another mug of ale. Do I what? Have someone, Darkfire said. A girl. It's difficult, Aaron said with a frown. In truth, he wasn't entirely certain of the answer himself. There was something between him and Jiang Fei, but he could not say what exactly it was. When it comes to women, it always is, Darkfire replied. Who is she? Someone I met while traveling, Aaron said. We spent half a year together, but we parted ways a little over a year ago. It might be a long time before I see her again. Darkfire nodded. If you're joining the Shadowflame Society, it will be years, perhaps even decades. Do you think she'll wait that long? I don't know. Aaron sighed. I don't even know if we will meet again. Aaron and Darkfire spent more time drinking and talking after that, even if neither of them could truly get drunk. For body refinement practitioners, drinking normal alcohol had little effect. Finally, well after midnight, they left the tavern. Yet they had only gone a few dozen paces when someone called out to them. Darkfire. When Aaron turned toward the voice, he saw that the one who had spoken was a tall young man with a gangly body and a scowl on his face that was probably intended to be intimidating but instead made him look like a spoiled and sulky youth. What do you want? Lead away. Darkfire said in a bored tone that made it clear he thought little of the young man. We heard you have a new friend. We just wanted to welcome him to the city. The tall youth slapped his bald fist in an awkward gesture that was more comical than it was intimidating. Are you sure about that? Darkfire asked, an amused smirk on his face. It might not go the way you expect. He doesn't look all that tough, Lead Away said. And besides, we're no cowards. Despite the words, Aaron could not help but notice that the tall youth seemed to have no intention of fighting alone, his companions standing close behind him, doing their very best to look threatening, a task that was clearly beyond them. Darkfire turned to Aaron. You should give it a go. Give them a good thrashing, but try not to hurt them too badly. Aaron nodded. Then, he stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Come on then, he said. Let's see what you can do. The tall youth and his companions approached cautiously, forming a half-circle around Aaron but staying several paces away. From their expressions, he could tell that his confidence made them wary. Still, he waited for one of them to make the first move. Finally, one of the young men darted forward toward Aaron, fists raised and ready to strike. An instant later, the rest followed, and Aaron found himself in the middle of the group, being attacked from all sides while defending himself from a rain of blows. Almost immediately, Aaron understood that it was like a grown man fighting a group of toddlers. He could tell that none of the young men practiced body refinement, and the fight was so one-sided as to be pointless. Even if he was far from an expert in hand-to-hand combat, it didn't matter. Lacking the strength to even bruise Aaron, there was nothing his opponents could do to hurt him. His own strikes, on the other hand, were far beyond anything they could withstand, and each time he struck, one of his opponents went down. One by one, they fell to Aaron's blows. He took care not to do any serious damage, limiting himself to only a fraction of his true strength. Even so, he thought most of them would be in pain for at least a week or two. The fight only lasted for some moments before Aaron had defeated the last of them. In truth, even calling it a fight was a stretch. The entire exchange was over in seconds, with Aaron finishing it completely unharmed. Bravo! Terrific job, a large and broad-shouldered man with a shaved head called out, clapping his hands as he approached. He was wearing a uniform, and although it looked a bit shabby, Aaron figured him for some kind of official. Especially you, lead the way, the bald man continued, glancing at the lanky young man. That new technique of yours, blocking punches with your face. Have you named it yet? Neither the tall youth nor his companions responded, instead helping each other back to their feet. When they were all standing again, some a bit unsteady on their feet, and several with bloodied faces, they eyed the bald man warily. Off with you, the man simply said, making a shooing gesture with his hands. At once, the group departed, but not before each of them gave Aaron a nod of acknowledgement. This surprised Aaron. He had not expected them to be gracious in defeat, but apparently, there was no bad blood between them. He gave a slight nod in response. Now then, the bald man said. Young Master Darkfire, who's your new friend? Ghost Blade, Darkfire answered, ignoring the puzzled look Aaron gave him. A pleasure to meet you, Ghost Blade, the man said, nodding at Aaron. I'm Xiao Zhuzi, the local guard captain. From the look of it, you're every bit as monstrous as your friend. Taking the words as a compliment, Aaron slightly bowed in response. Good to meet you, Captain Xiao, he said. I expect the governor will want to meet you, Captain Xiao said. The two of you should pay him a visit tomorrow. But until then, please, no more fights, save that for the tournaments. With a final wave at Aaron and Darkfire, the man departed, walking off casually. What was that about? Aaron asked Darkfire. And why did you want me to fight them? To be recruited, Darkfire began, you need to be noticed, and that means building a name for yourself. That's why they challenged you, even if they know they can't defeat me, defeating a friend of mine could still have won them some small fame. Aaron nodded, understanding now. And what about the governor? And the tournaments? The governor likes to know about any strong fighters who enter the city, Darkfire said. As for the tournaments, the city has weekly and monthly tournaments, where fighters try to make a name for themselves. The last words piqued Aaron's interest. When's the next one? He asked, already eager for a chance to test his skill. The next weekly tournament is tomorrow, Darkfire said. But don't get too excited, I doubt anyone there will be much of a challenge for you. What about you? Aaron asked. Do you ever fight in any of them? Me. I'm banned from participating, Darkfire said, giving Aaron a look of mock sadness that could not fully hide the grin underneath. They said I was ruining it for the others. Aaron chuckled, at once understanding the level of opponents he'd likely face. At a guess, he expected to see more young men and women of the kind he'd just faced, with more enthusiasm than strength. Remembering something, Aaron turned to Darkfire. Oh, and Ghost Blade. Really? Darkfire shrugged. You're pale, and you have a sword. But why not use my real name? Aaron asked, somewhat puzzled. It makes you sound weak, Darkfire explained. Like you haven't earned your own name yet. But I haven't, Aaron pointed out. Others don't need to know that, Darkfire replied, a big grin on his face. Chapter 72 Tournament. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When they returned to Darkfire's mansion, Aaron finally got a look at how vast the place was. With over 24 bedrooms, a library, several studies, and not one but two great dining halls, the mansion was clearly designed to house dozens of people. And yet, Darkfire lived there by himself, without even servants to look after it. Moreover, from the state of the place, it was clear that Darkfire wasn't much of a decorator. If the mansion hadn't been clean and mostly free of dust, Aaron could easily have believed it to be abandoned. You can take any room you want, Darkfire said. Other than my bedroom, I don't really use the place much. Then why get something so big? Aaron asked. The field outside is great for training, Darkfire replied with a grin. Aaron picked out a large bedroom on the second floor, with a good view of the city and a massive bed. After spending over a year sleeping on the stone floor of a prison cell, a soft bed would be a welcome change. He awoke early in the morning, and when he went downstairs, he found that Darkfire was already outside, practicing. Aaron observed him for a while, impressed by the sight. He could see that Darkfire was executing a seemingly endless series of sword strokes, each different from the last. Although there wasn't a pattern to the movements, exactly, to Aaron's eyes it looked as if Darkfire was engaged in a fight with a dozen invisible enemies. That training technique of yours. What is it? Aaron asked after Darkfire finished. It's something my mother taught me when I was a child, Darkfire replied. Let me show you how it works. Darkfire spent the next hours teaching the technique to Aaron, and although Aaron only understood a small part of it, he could already tell that it would greatly help his own training. Want to head for the tournament? Darkfire asked after they finished their training some hours later. We can visit the governor afterward. They arrived at the arena half an hour later. It was large, circular, and made of stone, with a floor covered in yellow sand. Although it looked like it could easily accommodate a crowd of thousands, right now only barely a quarter of the seats were taken. The weekly tournaments don't usually draw large crowds, Darkfire explained. Only the monthly ones draw out the strongest fighters. As Aaron looked around, he spotted half a dozen youths in black robes who stood out from the rest of the crowd, with nobody in the audience closer than 10 paces to them. Who are they? He asked, pointing at the group. Darkfire looked over, and the moment he saw the group, his face fell. Shadowbloods, he said in a disgusted voice. Shadowbloods. What are they? They're a faction within the Shadowflame Society, Darkfire said. If you know what's good for you, you'll stay far away from them. Why? Aaron asked. This was the first time he saw actual members of the Shadowflame Society, and he hadn't expected he would have to avoid them. They believe that only those born within the society should be allowed to join, Darkfire said. You don't see them much in the border cities, since they don't usually recruit outsiders. And when they do, those recruits are rarely seen again. And this group? Aaron asked. These are just novices, Darkfire said. But don't take them too lightly, they're still society members. If they try to recruit you, refuse, but be polite about it. No point in needlessly making enemies. Aaron nodded, deciding that he would do his best to stay away from the Shadowbloods. Yet even as he made the decision, he saw one of them point at Darkfire, and a moment later the group approached them. Darkfire, one of the Shadowflame novices began, a sinister smile on his face. I was wondering if your friend, fuck off, Darkfire said, not at all polite. The young man's smile disappeared instantly. You think just because you're family, fuck off. Darkfire said again, louder this time. The young man's face twisted in anger, and for a moment, it looked as if he was going to attack Darkfire. Yet an instant later, he regained his composure, although a scowl remained on his face. "One of these days you're going to get recruited," he said. "We'll see what happens when you're out there in the wilderness." After a final glare at Darkfire, he turned around and left, the other novices following close behind him. "That could have gone better," Aaron said once they were out of earshot. "Sorry about that," Darkfire said, sounding slightly embarrassed. "I just can't stand those treacherous bastards." Aaron nodded. Although part of him feared that the incident might cause problems in the future, he understood that Darkfire wasn't the type to hold his tongue. And even if it wasn't exactly convenient, Aaron appreciated the lack of duplicity. "So where do I go?" Aaron asked, turning his attention back to the tournament. "Follow me," Darkfire said, leading Aaron to an area on the side of the arena where a large group of young men and women stood, apparently waiting to fight. A large man immediately approached them, giving Darkfire a wary glance. Clearly, the man recognized who he was. "It's just him," Darkfire said, gesturing toward Aaron, and a look of relief appeared on the man's face. "Do you know the rules?" he asked, turning to Aaron. Aaron shook his head. "No sharpened weapons, and no killing blows," the man said. Pointing to Aaron's sword, he added, "You'll have to leave that outside the arena, and use one of the provided weapons." Aaron handed his sword to Darkfire, then walked over to a large bucket filled with blunted swords. None of them were particularly well made, but after a quick search, he found one that seemed at least halfway decent, even if it was far too light for his liking. As they waited for the fights to begin, Darkfire leaned over to Aaron. "Don't show your full strength," he said in a low voice. "You won't need it, and you don't want to draw any more attention from the Shadowbloods." They watched the first few fights from the sideline, and it didn't take long for Aaron to understand that there would be no real challenge today. Although the fighters might be skilled by normal standards, none of them seemed to have any training in magic or body refinement. When Aaron was finally called to fight, his first opponent turned out to be one of the young men he had fought the previous night, face still carrying a large bruise. The moment the young man saw Aaron, his eyes went wide with shock. "I concede," he called out, ending the fight before it had even started. The crowd booed and jeered as they walked back to the waiting area, and Aaron could not help but feel annoyed with the young man. Even if he had no chance of winning, he should at least give it an honest effort. The next few fights proved little more difficult than the first. Although now Aaron's opponents did make an effort, the difference in strength was just too large. Even with Aaron taking care not to injure his opponents, none of them lasted more than a few seconds. The one exception was his final opponent, but that was only because the man ran away the moment the fight started, much to the amusement of the crowd. When Aaron caught his opponent after a short chase, the man conceded before he could land even a single blow. Aaron felt some disappointment at his opponents, but then, he reminded himself that none were mages or body refiners. The announcer was just about to call out his victory, when suddenly, a voice sounded. "How about a real challenge?" Aaron sighed. Without even looking, he knew that the voice belonged to one of the Shadowbloods. Chapter 73 The Shadowblood Novice. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Aaron looked, he saw that one of the black-robed Shadowblood novices had jumped into the arena, sword already drawn. It was a brown-haired young man, tall and with an athletic build. He had an eager look on his face, bordering on manic, his eyes shining with lust for battle. "You're trying to build a name fighting only weaklings. Pathetic. Try fighting me, instead. Or are you afraid?" It was clear that the Shadowblood novice was trying to goad Aaron into attacking him, but Aaron wouldn't fall for it just yet. If he was going to have a real fight, he wanted something to show for his troubles. "What's in it for me?" Aaron responded, keeping his voice calm despite the situation. "If I defeat you, what do I get?" "You think you have a chance of defeating me?" The Shadowflame novice sneered at the suggestion. "Fine. If you win, you can have my sword." "Stop." By now, dark fire had rushed over, and he turned to Aaron. "I don't know if you can take him. If he uses magic." A troubled expression came over his face. The Shadowblood novice smiled wickedly. Afraid of facing a real opponent, he asked, a mocking tone in his voice. "But don't worry, I won't use magic, and I won't kill you. It's just a friendly little contest." "I accept the challenge," Aaron said in a loud voice, drawing some cheers from the crowd. Turning to Darkfire, he asked, "Hand me my sword, please." Darkfire hesitated. "Are you sure you can handle him?" Aaron gave him a confident nod. After the enemies he had faced in the Empire, a single novice shouldn't give him too much trouble. "Be careful," Darkfire said, handing Aaron the sword. In a low voice, he added, "And give him a thrashing he'll remember." Aaron gave his sword a few quick swings, then faced the Shadowblood novice. "Now let's see if your sword can match your words," Aaron said softly, giving the young man a mocking smile. His opponent wasted no time in attacking, immediately rushing forward with his sword drawn, launching a flurry of strikes the moment he reached Aaron. Aaron was pushed back several steps by the furious attack, and despite himself, he still felt some surprise at his opponent's power. Even if the Shadowblood novice was neither as strong nor as skilled as Darkfire, resisting him took Aaron more effort than he had expected. Moreover, Aaron could tell that despite his earlier words, his opponent had no intention of letting him step out of the arena alive. Each attack that came his way was meant to kill rather than injure, and he understood that the Shadowblood novice intended to finish him off quickly. Yet even if it took him some effort, Aaron was still easily capable of fending off attacks like these, and after some moments his opponent's face darkened as he finally understood that Aaron would not be easily defeated. As the attacks came to a halt, Aaron seized the offensive, launching a series of powerful strikes of his own. He did not hold back in the slightest, putting all his power in his attacks in an attempt to catch his opponent off guard. The tactic worked, and the young man stumbled backward, each of Aaron's powerful blows staggering him, forcing him to defend desperately without the chance to counter Aaron's blows. Aaron pressed the attack, striking rapidly at his opponent, and a panicked look appeared in the young man's eyes. Whatever it was he had expected from Aaron, this clearly wasn't it. It took only a moment before Aaron saw an opening appear, and he seized it without hesitation, his sword darting past his opponent's defenses. "Wait," the Shadowblood novice blurted out, Aaron's sword only inches away from him. "You've lost," Aaron said. "Concede." The novice stepped back, head bowed, and it seemed as if he was about to do as he was told. Yet just as Aaron was about to accept his opponent's surrender, the young man suddenly let go of his sword. Thrusting both hands forward, he produced a brightly glowing fireball that soared toward Aaron. Aaron only barely managed to dodge in time, but the fireball still grazed his shoulder, and immediately he could feel that he was injured. Shocked, he realized that if he had dodged only a moment later, it would have burned straight through him. He had been confident of his victory only a moment ago, but now he understood that the Shadowblood novice was far stronger than a novice should be. Yet he didn't have time to ponder the matter, because immediately another fireball came his way. Again Aaron dodged, this time managing to avoid the attack. Yet even as he got to his feet, he saw another fireball forming, and he knew that he was already too late to dodge it. At once, he threw up the strongest force shield he could manage, and although the fireball wasn't stopped, it was deflected enough to miss Aaron. Without stopping to think, Aaron launched a fireball of his own at the Shadowblood novice, using every bit of fire essence he had available. Although it wasn't anywhere near as strong as his opponent's attacks, it was enough to provide a moment's distraction. Aaron did not give his opponent time to recover. Instead, he followed up the fireball with a powerful wind blade, and then a battering force. In an instant, Aaron had used all his most powerful attacks, draining much of his essence in just a few seconds. The young man clearly had not expected to face such a sudden barrage of magic attacks, and he staggered backward, dazed and bleeding from a shallow wound across his chest. Aaron rushed forward, and before the novice could regain his senses, a powerful blow of Aaron's weapon disarmed him, sending his sword flying out of his hand. Aaron used his momentum to ram his elbow in the young man's face as hard as he could, and finally, the Shadowblood novice collapsed. Yet although his opponent was down, Aaron did not cease attacking. Rather, he took the opportunity to launch a final attack. "Stop!" a panicked voice sounded from the area where the other Shadowblood novices were standing. Aaron didn't listen. Instead, he brought down his heel with all the force he could muster, stomping down violently onto the downed novice's knee. It struck the young man's kneecap with an audible crash, the sound of bone being shattered sounding through the arena. Aaron could tell that the stomp had crushed not just the kneecap, but also the bones surrounding it. Instantly, a loud scream came forth from the novice who had tried to kill Aaron just moments earlier, a high-pitched squeal that sounded almost inhuman, like the sound of a pig being slaughtered. Without paying attention to the screaming novice, Aaron immediately turned toward the others. As expected, they were already rushing toward him, and he readied himself to defend against them if needed. "You," one of them said with a snarl, a black-haired young man with a face that was twisted in fury. "You'll pay for this." "He tried to kill me," Aaron said calmly. "He's lucky I only crippled him." The Shadowblood novice looked at Aaron with hate-filled eyes, yet it took him some moments to respond. "That's on you," he said finally. "You turned a friendly duel into a death match. Our friend was only defending himself from your attempts to kill him." "Don't be an idiot," Darkfire said. Hundreds of people saw what happened. Focused on the Shadowblood novices, Aaron had not seen Darkfire approach, but now, he was glad for the man's company. Against the Shadowblood novices, he needed all the help he could get. "Who do you think the society will believe?" the black-haired man responded. "Us, or some outsiders." "I trust they will believe me," a voice sounded. Soft and gentle, the voice was nevertheless filled with calm confidence. When Aaron looked, he saw the voice belonged to a short woman in her middle years, with black hair that showed some traces of white. Although she was wearing a simple gray robe, she somehow exuded an air of authority. Chapter 74 The Gray-Robed Lady. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The group of Shadowblood novices looked at the woman with some hesitation. Even if she was dressed simply, her calm confidence even when faced with mages suggested that she wasn't just a random person. "Who are you?" one of them finally asked, a young woman with large eyes and a pouting face. "Who are you to ask?" the woman replied. "I'm a member of the Shadowflame, so," the novice began. "You're a novice," the woman interrupted her. "A novice who mistakenly believes he has enough status to impress others." The young novice looked at her angrily, but still, she held her tongue, wary of the woman's identity and status. "Well," the woman said, with a cold look at the group of novices. "Well, what?" the novice said, some uncertainty in her voice. "Why are your insipid little faces still staring at me?" The woman's voice hardened as she spoke, and some anger could be heard in her voice. "Why haven't you left yet?" We. The novice stumbled over her words, clearly unsure of how to respond to the woman who had so suddenly appeared. Finally, she said, "He crippled one of us. One of you was an idiot who took on an opponent stronger than he could handle," the woman said. "The question now is whether the rest of you are idiots, too." To this, the novice had no answer. Wordlessly, she stared at the middle-aged woman, her face showing a struggle between fear and anger. Fear seemed to win out, and she silently took a step backward. "Leave. Now. Or that crippled fool will be the least of your worries." By now, the woman seemed to have lost her patience, and from her expression, it seemed that the Shadowblood novices were close to finding out who she was, in a most unpleasant way. No longer hesitating, two of the novices helped up Aaron's defeated opponent, supporting him as he leaned on their shoulders, one of his legs hanging limply next to the other. Although his earlier screams had ceased, he was still groaning in pain, and there was a senseless look in his eyes, as if the pain left him unable to focus. The others also finally took action, picking up the sword and seemingly getting ready to depart. Clearly, they were unwilling to risk the woman's ire, even if they didn't know who she was. "Wait!" Aaron said loudly. The novices stopped in their tracks, and the middle-aged woman gave Aaron a puzzled look. "What is it?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "His sword," Aaron said. "He said it was mine if I defeated him." Immediately, anger flared on the novices' faces. "You shameless bastard," one of them said in a furious tone. "You crippled him, and now you demand a prize." "We all heard your friend bet the sword," the gray-robed woman said. "And we all saw him get defeated. Are you saying he lacks even the dignity to honor his bets?" The novices didn't respond, and she added, "Besides, he doesn't have much use for it, anyway. If he ever recovers, it will be years from now. Until then, I don't imagine him being much good in a fight." Some of the novices' faces showed some defiance at this last humiliation, but the one who held the sword simply stepped toward Aaron and handed it over. Leaning over, he spoke in a low voice only Aaron could hear, "You won't have it for long." Aaron did not respond, simply accepting the sword with a gracious nod. He gave it a few swings, and was pleased to find that it was both heavy and well-balanced. While it might not match up to the star metal sword, he suspected it was a fair bit better than the sword he had used since arriving here. When he looked up again, he saw the shadow blood staring at him with murderous gazes. Had the gray-robed woman not been there, Aaron was certain they would have attacked immediately. Ignoring them, he faced the woman, giving her a respectful bow. "Thank you for the assistance," he said. "I'm in your debt." In the corner of his eye, he saw that the group of novices was finally leaving, but he did his best to show any concern or worry. For now, he thought his best chance would be to avoid appearing vulnerable. The more dangerous the novices thought, the less likely they would be to attack right away. With a bit of luck, he might be out of the city before they took action. The woman gave Aaron a slight smile, then said, "There's no debt. I'm just helping keep the peace in the city." Aaron gave her a nod, then turned to Darkfire. "Perhaps it's time for us to leave." Even if the situation had been resolved for the moment, Aaron was anxious to be away from the arena. "Not so fast," the woman said before Darkfire could respond. "First, I need the two of you to come with me." Aaron hesitated for a moment, but then he nodded, even if he felt somewhat wary of the mysterious woman. She had just saved him from an extremely dangerous situation, and he would not repay kindness with rudeness. "Of course," Darkfire said with a slight bow. "Lead the way." With that, they left, following the gray-robed woman out of the arena. They walked in silence for several blocks, until suddenly, she stopped. To Aaron's surprise, she let out a deep sigh, and her calm confidence seemed to disappear in an instant. "That was terrifying," she said, a slight tremble in her voice. "Lady Alara," Darkfire said, a huge grin on his face, "that truly was a performance worthy of applause." "You owe me for this, Darkfire," she replied, giving him a dark look. "I always honor my debts," Darkfire responded. "But for now, perhaps we should celebrate with some drinks." Lady Alara shook her head. "We'll need to see my brother," she said. "Immediately." "What just happened here?" "He needs to know about it." Turning to Aaron, she added, "What you just did may well be one of the stupidest things anyone has ever done in the history of this city." Chapter 75 Governor Edarin. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Stupid. Aaron gave the woman an annoyed look. "What the hell was I supposed to do? Let that bastard kill me." Lady Alara shook her head. "Of course you had to defend yourself. But did you really have to cripple him?" "If I hadn't, he would have been back in the fight a moment later," Aaron said. "But you were stronger than him," she replied. "Even if he got up again, wouldn't the result have been the same?" "Stronger? Me?" Aaron let out a mirthless laugh. "The moment he began to use magic, I was only a single mistake away from death. You're a mage, how could you not see that?" I'm not a mage, Lady Alara said. I'm just the governor's sister. There's not a thing I could have done if they had decided to attack, although I'm sure my brother would have sent them a strongly worded letter had they killed me. At this, Aaron frowned, finally understanding the situation. Rather than being a powerful mage, the woman had merely put on a front, using the novice's ignorance to intimidate them. Then I owe you an apology, he said. You saved my life, and at great risk to yourself. Lady Alara simply nodded in acknowledgement. So you had no other choice, she asked, her brow furrowed in thought. I could have killed him while he was down, Aaron replied. Other than that, my only chance was to catch him unprepared and take him out of the fight before he could recover. Lady Alara sighed, a troubled expression on her face. I suppose it doesn't matter now. What's done is done. For now, we'll go visit my brother, and see if he had any ideas. They set off once more, Lady Alara leading the way as Aaron and Darkfire followed. They mostly stuck to the city's back streets, and before long, they reached a wealthier part of the city, where the houses were larger and the streets wider. After some time, they arrived at a walled mansion that was even larger than Darkfire's, with several uniformed guards posted at the gate. When the guards recognized Lady Alara, they waved them through wordlessly, respectfully bowing as she passed. Inside the gate, Aaron was impressed at the size of the mansion. Half a dozen buildings of wood and stone stood around a splendidly decorated courtyard that featured at least half a dozen marble statues, and there were dozens of servants and guards hurrying across the courtyard's many paths. Lady Alara wasted no time, immediately heading for the largest building at the far end of the courtyard. 4 stories high and carved from marble, it was a truly impressive building. A large wooden door stood open at its entrance, and on either side of the door, there were a handful of uniformed guards, spears in their hands and swords at their sides. Is my brother inside? Lady Alara asked one of the guards. He's in his office, the man said. I think he's expecting you, he added in a softer voice, seeming slightly nervous. They headed inside, Lady Alara leading the way, and once more Aaron found himself impressed. The hallways were broad and clean, lined with paintings and busts, and it looked as if considerable effort had gone into decorating the place. After going through several hallways and heading up 2 sets of stairs, they finally arrived at a large wooden door that had 2 guards posted in front of it. As soon as the guards saw Lady Alara, one of them gave the door 2 hard knocks, and a moment later, a muffled voice could be heard from inside. Come in. The guards opened the door, closing it after Aaron and the other 2 had passed. Inside was a luxurious office with its walls filled with well-stocked bookcases, and a large wooden desk stood in the middle of the office. Behind the desk sat a slender man with a gentle face and white hair that still contained some traces of the black it had once been, and although he looked neither imposing nor powerful, Aaron understood that he must be the governor. Governor Edarin, Darkfire said with a respectful bow, and Aaron quickly followed his example. Darkfire, the governor said with a nod. Looking at Aaron, he added, and this must be your friend, Ghostblade. Aaron nodded, even if the name still felt alien to him. When Captain Shao informed me that a powerful friend of Darkfire had entered the city, I did not expect there would be trouble quite as soon, the governor said. Turning his head toward Lady Alara, he added, nor did I expect that my family would get involved in it. Lady Alara shrugged, though her expression was apologetic. A group of Shadowblood novices tried to kill him, she said. I just decided to step in before things got out of hand. Whatever the reason, it does not matter now, the governor said. What matters is that we're in a bit of a mess, and we need a solution. He turned to Darkfire. I've already sent word to your family, but it could be some weeks before I receive an answer. Until then, Aramont isn't safe for you and your friend. Aaron could no longer remain quiet. But aren't you the governor? He asked, voice filled with frustration. Can't you stop them from causing trouble in the city? Governor Edarin gave Aaron a puzzled look. Darkfire hasn't told you about the situation, then. He only just arrived in the city, Darkfire said, a sorrowful look on his face. I haven't had time to explain all of it to him. The governor looked at Aaron with a troubled expression, remaining silent for some moments. Finally, he spoke, his voice grave. For now, what you need to understand is that I hold little power here, he said. The real power is in the hands of the Shadow Flame Society, and their members' actions are outside my control. If they cause trouble, only the society can punish them, but any punishment will take a long time in coming, and if the troublemakers enjoy protection within the society, there might be no punishment at all. I assume the Shadow Blood novices enjoy protection within the Shadow Flame Society? Aaron asked. Just from their behavior, he guessed that they had more powerful people backing them. Correct, the governor said. Thankfully, the Shadow Blood novices don't visit the city often, but when they do. He threw up his hands in a powerless gesture. We should be safe at my place, Darkfire said. They wouldn't dare start an open conflict with my family. I wouldn't stake my life on that, the governor said. And even if they don't harm you, they could still kill your friend without you being able to stop them. Unless you finally gain some magical abilities. Darkfire shook his head at the last part, a dispirited expression on his face. Then what do we do? He asked. I own a small estate outside the city, the governor said. You should be safe there, at least for a few weeks. By then, hopefully, your family will have sent some help. They will, Darkfire said, sounding confident. They would not allow some Shadow Blood novices to cause trouble for someone in the family, not even if it's me. Good, Governor Edorin said. You can spend the night here. I will arrange for you to travel out of the city before first light. Chapter 76 Leaving the City. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. After Aaron and Darkfire left the governor's office, a servant escorted them to the guest quarters, which turned out to be an otherwise empty building with a handful of bedrooms, a dining room, a sitting room, and several bathrooms. Once they arrived, several other servants brought them food and drinks, then departed, leaving the two of them alone in the dining room. For some time, Aaron and Darkfire sat in silence, eating their meals while drinking the governor's fine wines. Finally, Darkfire spoke. You can use magic, he said, a complicated expression on his face. I can, Aaron replied. You didn't tell me. Even if Darkfire didn't sound angry, Aaron could hear some disappointment in his voice, and he knew Darkfire's trust had been hurt by Aaron's failure to tell him earlier. I would have told you, Aaron said, but we only just met, and with the academy after me, I try not to show it too much. No matter, Darkfire said, his expression softening. With a slight grin, he added, that fight of yours was truly something. That Shadow Blood idiot didn't know what hit him. Aaron laughed, glad to change the subject. I hadn't expected it to go that far. I never thought he would actually try to kill me. I'm afraid I'm to blame for that, Darkfire said, looking uncomfortable. They targeted you to get to me, and it almost cost you your life. Although Aaron wanted to deny it, he knew it was true. Even if he didn't blame Darkfire for what happened, the Shadow Blood novice's true target had almost certainly been Darkfire. After a moment, Aaron shrugged. Whatever their reason, they got what they deserved. And then some, Darkfire said, laughing. When you stomped on his knee, I think people could hear him scream even beyond the city walls. Aaron winced at this. Although it had been the best decision in the heat of battle, he had not intended to be that ruthless. You've seen a lot of battle, I take it? Darkfire asked. I have, Aaron answered honestly. Ever since the academy came after me, it's been one battle after another. What about you? I've been in a few fights, Darkfire said, though mostly against bandits and the like. I've never been up against real opponents. Not in real fights, at least. The answer surprised Aaron. He had expected Darkfire to be a seasoned fighter, given the young man's obvious skill. Seeing Aaron's confounded look, Darkfire laughed. It's not that I've avoided battle, I just never had many opportunities to fight outside of training, he said. I spent my youth in the Shadow Flame Society, and after that, I moved here. Just about all good fighters I've met were society members. What about the Shadow Bloods? Eren asked. Loathsome though they are, they'd never attack a society member, Darkfire replied. Not inside the borders, at least. What about outside the borders? Joining the Shadow Flame Society would require Eren to travel beyond the Empire's borders, and he felt some worry about what could happen there. A thoughtful look appeared on Darkfire's face. I suppose things will be different there. Many initiates and novices disappear beyond the borders every year, and there's little anyone can do to find out who's responsible. The answer did little to ease Eren's worries, but the wine proved to be more effective. They spent several hours drinking and talking, until they had all but forgotten about the day's events. When they finally went to bed, it was well past midnight, and Eren had barely fallen asleep when a loud banging sounded on his door. Time to wake up, a voice sounded, followed by more banging on the door. Eren rubbed his eyes, then called out, "Who is it?" The door opened, and briefly, Eren saw only a broad-shouldered silhouette standing in the doorway. When his eyes finally adjusted to the light, he saw that it was Captain Shao. "Get dressed. We're leaving in half an hour." Seeing that Eren was well and truly awake, Captain Shao moved on, leaving him to drag his weary body from the bed. Although the fight the day before hadn't been too bad, as far as fights went, at least, his body was still sore, and his shoulder still injured. Even if the injury was a minor one, he wished he had more time to rest and allow it to heal. Yet clearly, rest and healing would have to wait. After Eren got dressed, he headed to the sitting room, where he found Captain Shao and a sleepy-looking Darkfire. He greeted Darkfire with a nod, then turned to Captain Shao. "We're leaving already. The two of you can eat first, but I want to be out of the city a good 2 hours before sunrise," the big man said. "This time of morning, there's few prying eyes. And after yesterday, I figure the fewer people who know where you are, the better." They ate quickly, and before long, Eren and Darkfire were following Captain Shao along the dark city streets, the three of them all covered in grey cloaks. When Eren remarked that the cloaks only made them look more suspicious, Captain Shao laughed. "The city is filled with suspicious people," he said. "What matters is that they don't know which of them we are." As Captain Shao had said, they left the city a good 2 hours before sunrise, and by first light, they were already several miles away. Even if the man had not seemed especially nervous earlier, Eren could see that Captain Zhao's became more relaxed as they put distance between them and the city. The journey took them several uneventful days, and eventually, they arrived at an estate that was surrounded by farmlands. Although Governor Edoran had said the estate was small, to Eren's eyes it looked quite large, with several buildings surrounding a sizable courtyard. "This is it," Captain Shao said when they arrived. "I'll be leaving you here, but there are half a dozen servants who can help if you need anything." After they said their goodbyes, it wasn't long before Captain Shao departed again, leaving Eren and Darkfire behind at the estate. They settled in quickly, each of them picking an empty room in the main building. The rooms were simple but luxurious, as if they had been decorated according to a wealthy official's idea of what a farmhouse should look like. Once they finished picking rooms, they explored the area surrounding the buildings. It was mostly empty farmland, with a small vineyard and a few acres of rocky hills. Bdnvldm altogether, it was a pleasant if somewhat dull place, perfect as a temporary hideout, even if Eren would prefer not to stay there for too long. That night, Eren and Darkfire sat together in the sitting room, drinking wine as they talked about the city and the Shadowflame Society. As they talked, an idea entered Eren's mind. "You have a realm, right?" he asked. "I do," Darkfire said, the topic bringing a gloomy look to his face. "I just never managed to open it. I tried for several years, but I never succeeded in even finding it." Eren hesitated, but only for a moment. "I think I can help," he said. Chapter 77 Dark Fire's Ordeal. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You can help. Dark Fire gave Aaron a doubtful look. With my realm. I can, Aaron said confidently. Just wait a moment. It didn't take him long to find one of the realm-opening pills he had left in his void bags, and after taking it out, he held it up between his fingers. Know what this is? At once, Darkfire's eyes went wide. Is that a realm-opening pill? You're familiar with them. I know they're used to open realms, Darkfire said, his eyes focused on the pill as if it was a precious gem. I've never seen one with my own eyes, though. It's yours if you want it, Aaron told him. With that, you should be able to open your realm tonight. An astonished look came over Darkfire's face, and for several moments, he said nothing. I can't accept it, he finally said, his expression pained. It's far too valuable. Nonsense, Aaron replied. I don't have much use for them anymore, and I have more treasure than I know what to do with. You don't understand, Darkfire said, his voice low. Within the Shadowflame Society, realm-opening pills are unimaginably valuable. Just with this, you could buy yourself a position of power in the society. How so? Aaron asked. Although he knew that they were valuable, he imagined that an organization as powerful as the Shadowflame Society would have plenty of them. The society has 9 valleys, each of them home to millions of people, Darkfire said. Millions. Aaron knew the Shadowflame Society was large, but somehow, he had imagined it to be like a larger version of Windsong's monastery. Darkfire nodded, then continued, the children of society members are given realms when they are young, and those who succeed in opening them can join without having to be recruited. But there are many thousands like me, who are unable to open their realms. But if the Shadowflame Society is so powerful, can't they just get more? To Aaron's mind, realm-opening pills were rare, but not that difficult to get. All told, he had used well over a dozen just by himself. Each realm-opening pill requires the condensed essence of a grandmaster, Darkfire said with a sigh. No matter how hard the society tries to gather them, there are never enough for even a fraction of those who need them. There are just too many people who need them. Then what happens to those who can't open their realms? Aaron asked, finally understanding that things were more difficult than he had imagined. Do they all head to the border cities, like you? Most stay in the valleys, Darkfire said. Even if they can't become true members of the society, life in the valleys isn't too bad. The rest of us. We head to the border cities, hoping to get recruited. Surviving the initiation means you become a full member of the society, even without an opened realm. As Aaron looked at the pill in his hand, now understanding how valuable it was to those without magic. For those who failed to open a realm, it could mean the difference between living as a commoner or a mage. Just that one pill you're holding is enough to buy you a life of comfort within the society, Darkfire said. And there are many powerful families who would stop at nothing to get it. Aaron gave it some thought. Finally, he shrugged. It's a good thing I have more of them, then. You mean? It's yours, Aaron said, tossing the pill over to Darkfire. Darkfire looked like he was about to object, but after a few moments, he let out a deep sigh. Thank you, he said. Before you take it, Aaron said, do you have any other realms? Darkfire shook his head. Just fire. They wouldn't give me any others until I succeeded in opening that. Aaron furrowed his brow, then dug into his void bags. A short while later, he held up 2 scrolls. Before using the pill, read these, he said. They'll give you shadow and wind realms. That's too much, Darkfire said, shaking his head. You've already given me a realm-opening pill. I can't accept more. Don't be an idiot, Aaron replied. If you're going to use a realm-opening pill, it's better to open several realms at once. Darkfire had no response to that, and he accepted the scrolls, albeit reluctantly. The next 2 hours, Darkfire diligently studied the scrolls as Aaron sat and waited, using Lord Zhang's circulation technique to speed up his injured shoulder's healing. While the injury had mostly healed already, it still felt slightly sore. Finally, Darkfire finished, the second scroll crumbling to dust in his hands. "So how does it work?" he asked, taking the pill in his hand with a nervous look. "You just swallow it," Aaron said. "It'll hurt like hell for a few hours, but once that passes, your realms will be opened, and you'll have access to more essence than someone with several years of training." "How bad is it?" Darkfire looked more curious than worried, and Aaron could tell that to Darkfire, gaining a realm was worth any amount of pain. "It's like being doused in oil and set on fire," Aaron answered truthfully. "But as a body refiner, you shouldn't be in any real danger." "That bad, huh?" Darkfire said with a slight frown. "Well, here goes." Without hesitating, he took the pill in his mouth and swallowed it. They sat in silence for several minutes, Aaron watching Darkfire as they waited for the pill to take effect. "This isn't too bad," Darkfire said finally. "It just feels slightly warm," and, suddenly, his eyes went wide with shock. "Fuck." Aaron only barely managed to suppress a laugh as his friend cried out at the sudden pain. "It gets worse," he said with a chuckle. "Worse?" Darkfire stared at him wide-eyed, face twisted in agony. "Just how much worse can it, ow? Shit." Aaron watched with some amusement as Darkfire let out a litany of curses and screams while the pill did its work. He did not feel too bad for Darkfire, the pain was only temporary, and he knew that just a few hours from now, his friend would have something he'd longed for all his life. After an hour, a worried-looking servant stepped into the room, drawn by Darkfire's screams, and his eyes went wide with panic when he saw Darkfire's twisted body. "What's wrong with him?" the man asked frantically. With a fearful look at Aaron, he added, "Did you do this?" "Ease up," Aaron said. "He's just doing some strenuous training. In a few hours, he'll be fine, better than fine, really." The servant gave Aaron a distrustful look, but he backed out of the room, undoubtedly realizing that even if Aaron had performed some dark magic on Darkfire, there was nothing he could do about it. Another hour passed, and finally, Darkfire lost consciousness. Aaron could not help but think being a body refiner had not served him well, someone else would have passed out within the first hour, avoiding much of the pain. As Darkfire lay unconscious, Aaron examined the sword he had won a few days earlier. Long and heavy, it was forged from a dark type of steel that he did not recognize, and once more he was impressed by its quality. Although he couldn't be certain, he thought it might well match up to the star metal sword. One of these days, he thought, he should get his treasures looked at by someone who knew more about these things. Aaron's thoughts were interrupted when he heard Darkfire groan. Immediately, his eyes shot toward his friend. Despite knowing that there was not much danger, he had begun to feel somewhat worried as Darkfire lay unconscious, and he was relieved when he saw Darkfire slowly opening his eyes. "That," Darkfire said, his voice slow and hoarse, "was bloody terrible." Aaron relaxed as he heard the words. If Darkfire was able to complain, then he should be all right. It took Darkfire some time to recover from the ordeal, but he eventually sat up, a weary look on his face. "So was that it, then?" he asked. "You want some more?" Aaron replied with a chuckle. "Gods, no," Darkfire said hurriedly. "I'd rather gnaw off my own leg." "But did it work?" "See for yourself," Aaron said, smiling in anticipation. "Just close your eyes, and focus on what's inside of you." Darkfire did as Aaron said, and some moments later, he opened his eyes again, his expression ecstatic. "I can feel it," he said loudly. "I can actually feel the essence inside my body." Chapter 78 A New Arrival. You are listening at novelfull.audio. "You did what?" Darkfire stared at Aaron in disbelief. "I took 10 of the pills," Aaron said again. "At the same time." They sat on the top of a hill about a mile from the estate, taking a short break from training. Ever since Darkfire had opened his realms 2 weeks earlier, he had trained relentlessly, with Aaron helping as best he could. What the hell made you think that was a good idea? Darkfire looked like he had just seen a goat sprout wings and fly up into the sky. It was either that, or get killed by an archmage, Aaron said, shrugging. At least the pills gave me a chance. And you survived. Clearly. His shocked expression finally easing, Darkfire burst into laughter. That archmage must have had quite the look on his face, being defeated by a novice. Initiate, Aaron corrected him. I only learned my first spell after that. And really, there wasn't much left of his face after the fight. So what happened after that? I took only one realm opening pill, and I'm still amazed at the amount of power I have now. It was more essence than I could handle, Aaron replied. I nearly died, and I had to learn body refinement just to withstand it. Can you show me? Darkfire asked, a curious glint in his eyes. How much essence you can use if you go all out? Sure, Aaron said. See that hill over there? He pointed at a large hill around 200 paces from the one they sat on. He stood up and raised his right hand, then willed all the fire essence he could control into it. Without the urgency of a fight, he could take his time, ensuring that he gathered every bit of power he could use. Finally, he felt that he could gather no more, and with a burst of effort, he expelled the fire essence from his hand, forcing it into a massive fireball that he sent rushing toward the hill. When it hit, the entire hill was engulfed in fire. A moment later a booming sound hit them, as loud as 100 thunderclaps, and Aaron could feel the heat of the shockwave when it reached them. For some moments, all that could be seen was dust filling the air, but when it finally cleared, the entire hilltop had disappeared. Wow, Darkfire said. That was awesome. But I know, Aaron said before he could finish. The Shadowblood novice was stronger. And I imagine the same holds true for other novices in the Shadowflame Society. He had already given the matter some thought, but so far, he had failed to come up with an explanation. He knew that in terms of raw power, he came close to matching an academy master. Yet when the Shadowblood novice had used magic against him in the arena, the attacks were far stronger than his own. Darkfire frowned. Not stronger, exactly. When you use essence, it's like you're controlling a foreign object. But with them, it's like it's part of their body. Watch this, Aaron said. Once again he gathered essence, force essence this time. Even if his fire realm was stronger than his force realm, the battering force spell more than made up for the smaller amount of essence. After months of practice, he could now form the battering force spell almost effortlessly, and he thrust out his hand again a moment later. Nothing could be seen emerging from his hand, but almost immediately, the remains of the hill exploded violently. Even if the impact didn't look quite as impressive as when he used fire, the devastation was even greater. Where the hill had stood, there was now a shallow pit, its edges lined with debris from the explosion. See? Aaron said. This time I used a spell instead of a technique, and the essence was more concentrated. But still, it wasn't anywhere near as powerful as what that novice used. Maybe it's a matter of practice. Darkfire offered. How long ago did you learn to cast spells? Not too long ago, but that's not the issue, Aaron replied. I've seen academy mages use magic, and even the strongest ones lacked the type of control that novice had. They had far more raw power, of course, much of it was just wasted. Aaron was certain it had something to do with the pillars of power that Panurge had told him about, but he still hadn't figured out what it was. I don't know much about magic, Darkfire said, looking thoughtful. They never told those of us without opened realms about it. But I once overheard my parents talking about something that might be related. What did they say? Aaron asked, immediately interested. Darkfire's parents were mages within the Shadowflame Society, and he was certain that they would know more about this. It was something about how most of the Empire's mages walked a false path, making them weaker than society members. Darkfire shook his head, scrunching his face in thought as he tried to recall the memory. I don't remember much of it. It was long ago, and back then, it made little sense to me. Aaron nodded thoughtfully. He was certain that the false path Darkfire had mentioned was somehow connected to Panurge's pillars, and although the tiny shred of information did little to help him, he committed it to memory nonetheless. As he stared into the distance, lost in thought, Aaron suddenly noticed a small group of people in the distance. Although they were too far away to be recognizable, it looked as if they were heading toward the estate. Look, he said. They're coming this way. Darkfire looked toward the group, and apprehension appeared on his face. Think they're the ones Governor Edorin sent for? We'll find out soon enough, Aaron said. But just in case, we should probably prepare for a fight. They hurried down the hill, back to the estate. When they arrived, the servants looked at them in worry, clearly recognizing that something was wrong. There might be trouble, Darkfire said to them. All of you should hide in the basement, just to be sure. If you don't hear any sounds of battle soon, it should be safe to come out in an hour or so. The servants immediately rushed off, understandably unwilling to face whatever it was that was about to happen. After the weeks they had seen Aaron and Darkfire training, they should know that any fight involving the two young men was something they wanted no part of. As the servants hid in the basement, Aaron and Darkfire made some hasty preparations, even if there wasn't much they could do. Darkfire changed into an armored coat and belted on two swords. From his tense look, Aaron could tell he was worried, and with good reason. For his part, Aaron changed into the black robe Jiang Fei had given him when he left Silvermere. Even if it wasn't as good as armor, it was still enchanted, and it should give him at least some protection if there was a battle. He wore the sword he had won from the Shadowblood novice, with the star metal sword and the dragonbone bow at the ready in his void bag. There wasn't much else they could do after that, and they headed toward the path leading up to the estate. Both of them eyed the road nervously, and it wasn't long before the small group of people they had spotted from the hilltop appeared. When Aaron recognized them, he let out a curse. At the front of the group was a black-robed woman he didn't know, but behind her were the Shadowblood novices, the one he had crippled sitting on horseback. Well, damn, Darkfire said. Think we can still run? Aaron sighed, his hand grabbing the hilt of his sword as the group slowly approached them. Chapter 79 Judgment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As Aaron waited for the group to reach them, his only comfort was that there was no immediate attack. But then, he realized that there was no reason for them to attack straight away. Even if the woman was completely powerless, something he strongly doubted, the novices were strong enough to not need surprise attacks against Darkfire and himself. With some luck, he would be able to take one of them in a fair fight. If Darkfire managed to keep another busy long enough for Aaron to finish the first, perhaps they could barely defeat two of the novices, and even that would require a great deal of luck. But now, there were 5 Shadowblood novices before them, not counting the crippled one. There simply was no amount of luck that would allow them to overcome those odds. They waited in silence, neither Darkfire nor Aaron feeling the need to speak. Whatever was going to happen, they would have to face, and there was no amount of talking that could change that. As the group approached, Aaron got a better look at the woman in front. She was tall, with long dark hair and black eyes. There was something wild and domineering about her appearance, as if she was longing for battle, and there was an ageless quality to her face, making it impossible to tell just how old she was. Shit! Darkfire hissed quietly. This is bad. Unhappy to see me, Darkfire, the woman called out. Elder Batu, he said, bowing deeply. We're honored at your company, of course, although the two of us hardly seem worthy of your attention. As Darkfire finished speaking, the woman came to a stop a few paces away from them. She gave Darkfire a derisive sneer, then spoke, You think charm will solve your problems? It was worth a try, Darkfire said with a shrug. Better than calling you a terrifying monster, I'd think. Elder Badu let out a shrill laugh. I do appreciate honesty, she said. Then, she turned to Aaron. This is the one who crippled my nephew. That's him, Elder, one of the novices behind her said, his voice gratingly sycophantic. What's your name? She asked, looking Aaron up and down as if he was a piece of cattle. Ghost Blade. There was little point in trying to resist her questions, but he would not resort to groveling, mostly because he doubted it would help. You crippled my nephew, she said, staring at him intently. What do you have to say for yourself? He tried to kill me, Aaron replied. All I did was defend myself. If you were just defending yourself, why did you choose to cripple him? There was no anger on her face. Instead, she seemed genuinely curious about what his answer would be. He was stronger than me, Aaron answered honestly. It was the only way I could take him out of the fight. She nodded, her expression one that could almost be mistaken for approval. Then, she turned toward the novices behind her. Now, which of you can tell me what happened? I can, Elder. The one who spoke was a young woman with pouting lips and a face that would be pretty had it not been for a hint of cruelty in her eyes. Then what are you waiting for? Elder Bata said. Speak. Novice Arban challenged the outsider to a friendly duel, the novice began hurriedly. When the outsider was about to lose, he used an underhanded magic attack to gain the advantage, then crippled Novice Arban before he could react. Elder Badu gave the young woman a smile so cold it sent shivers down Aaron's spine. Let's try that again, she said slowly. And this time, if you tell even the slightest lie, I will burn those pretty eyes from your face. The novice paled instantly, a fearful expression appearing on her face. I didn't, she began. Tell me the truth, Elder Badu interrupted her, or suffer the consequences. The young woman shot a panicked look at the other novices, but seeing that they would be no help, she sighed in resignation. Once more she told the story, but this time, she told the truth, not even omitting the slightest detail. So that's what happened, Elder Bata said, her gaze resting on her nephew. You wanted to kill the outsider to shame Darkfire, and when he defeated you, you tried to blindside him with a magic attack. And still, you lost. It seems my brother's blood runs strong in you. The young man cried out in protest, but she ignored him, turning toward the other novices. Their faces, filled with arrogant confidence only minutes ago, were now fearful. All of you have shamed the society. As penance, you will serve beyond the border for 1 decade, alone. Those who survive will be allowed to return. The novices responded with looks of shock and horror, but none of them dared to speak against her. It was clear that Elder Badu was not in a merciful mood. Leave now, Elder Badu said. If any of you delay in departing, or return early, your punishment will be death. It only took a few moments before the novices were gone, leaving behind Aaron and Darkfire, Elder Badu, and the crippled young man. Now, my nephew, Elder Badu said, her eyes cold, you have shamed not only the society, but also our family. And look at you now. Useless. I could banish you for your actions, but then, a stain like this requires thorough cleaning. She stretched her hand toward him with a calm gesture that nevertheless held great threat, and Aaron nearly gasped in shock when he understood what was about to happen. You can't do this, the young man cried out. Yet even as he finished the words, his eyes glazed over, his body slumping down from the horse a second later. And so dies my grandfather's name, Elder Bata said. She remained silent for a short while, looking at her nephew's corpse in disgust. Finally, she turned her attention back to Aaron. You must think me heartless, she said, her voice cold, without even the faintest trace of emotion. Aaron could certainly have agreed with that, though other terms came to mind as well, like murderous or insane. Yet he held his tongue, for fear of losing it. I'm just glad you didn't kill me, he finally said, understanding that she was waiting for an answer. War is coming, she responded. And the society needs fighters. Weak as you are, your victory over my nephew means you might be of some use yet. Aaron did not reply, simply nodding. Given the woman's terrifying behavior, he did not want to run even the slightest risk of offending her. I see you are wearing my grandfather's sword, she remarked with a look at his side. Immediately, Aaron unsheathed the sword, handing it hilt first to Elder Batu. You can have it, he said quickly. Had I known it belonged to your family, I wouldn't have taken it. I don't want the cursed thing, she replied. It was forged by my grandfather, then passed down from my useless father to my useless brother, before falling into the hands of my useless nephew. Keep it, if you think it will bring you better luck. Aaron hesitated briefly, then sheathed the sword again. To him, a sword was just a tool, neither lucky nor unlucky. And as far as swords went, this was a particularly fine one. What happens now? He asked. Now, she said, you travel north. The other Shadowblood fools will undoubtedly figure out what happened, and when they do, this region will no longer be safe for you. You're telling us to join a different valley. Darkfire had been quiet before, but now, he spoke in an astonished tone, a tremble of anxiety in his voice. But what about? I will inform your parents that you are safe, Elder Batu cut in. They're the ones who asked me to come here in the first place. Then you were the one who was sent to help us? Aaron asked, puzzled at the sudden revelation. I was asked to deliver a fair judgment, she replied. My fool nephew and his fool friends thought a few drops of shared blood would be enough to sway my decision. But between blood and the society, there can be no choice. Turning to Darkfire, she added, you would do well to remember that. So what should we do? Darkfire asked, his brow furrowed in thought. Travel to one of the border cities near the 6th Valley, Elder Batu said. Then, get recruited. With your skills, that shouldn't be too hard a task, although I would suggest hiding your magical abilities for the time being. Should we use different names? Aaron asked, hoping for an excuse to finally get rid of the Ghostblade moniker. Darkfire and Ghostblade. She raised an eyebrow. There are hundreds with those names in every valley. I'd say your lack of imagination serves you well, in this case. Aaron let out a sigh. It seemed that for now, he was stuck with that ridiculous name. Unless you have any other questions, I shall leave now, Elder Batu announced. Aaron kept his mouth firmly shut. Whatever questions he had could wait until he found someone less frightening to ask. Elder Batu wasted no time on goodbyes, instead simply turning around and walking off. Both Aaron and Darkfire stood in silence, until finally, Aaron was certain she was gone. That, he said in a low voice, is a terrifying woman. You don't know the half of it, Darkfire replied. Chapter 80 New Techniques. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Aaron and Darkfire left the estate not long after Elder Batu. While they had months of travel ahead of them, there wasn't much they could do to prepare. Aaron already carried multiple void bags filled with food and supplies, while Darkfire had only his sword, an armored coat, and some clothes. Now that Darkfire had opened his realms, he was able to use void bags, but since he had none of his own, Aaron gave him the one that had belonged to Stormleaf. He filled it with food and other supplies, adding some of the remaining treasures from the Herald's stronghold as well. Darkfire accepted the gifts reluctantly. Although he seemed excited at having a void bag of his own, Aaron could tell he felt uncomfortable at the help he was receiving. My debt to you grows larger every day, Darkfire said. At this rate, I won't ever be able to repay it. There are no debts between friends, Aaron replied. Besides, having someone to watch my back is more valuable than any treasure. In truth, there was more to it than that. After the year Aaron had spent alone in a dungeon cell, simply having someone to talk to was a luxury he treasured. If some small gifts could help prevent Darkfire from dying to some random misfortune, then he would gladly part with them. They did not hurry in their travels, instead using the time to train together. Being recruited into the Shadowflame Society might be easy enough, but after that, they would travel beyond the border, where dangers abounded. Darkfire made steady progress in his magical abilities, and with Aaron's guidance and Jiang Fei's notes, it took him only a month to form his first wind blade. At this, Aaron could not help but feel some slight jealousy. Even if he was glad to see his friend progress this rapidly, he was reminded of how much longer it had taken him to achieve the same feat. Still, he quickly rid himself of the thought. With Darkfire as a friend and ally, any progress Darkfire made would benefit both of them. As they traveled, Aaron also shared Lord Zhang's food and Panurge's wine with Darkfire, who was astonished at the natural essence they contained. "No wonder you're so strong," Darkfire said with a baffled laugh. "Even princes would be lucky to have just a fraction of all this." To Aaron's surprise, Darkfire's power rose rapidly in the weeks that followed, to the point where he closed much of the gap in strength between Aaron and himself. Aaron had previously been able to match Darkfire in combat by relying on his superior strength, but now, he found himself struggling to keep up. Even if he was still somewhat stronger, the difference just wasn't large enough anymore to make up for Darkfire's expertise with the sword. One night, Darkfire suddenly stopped in the middle of a training session. "There's something we need to discuss," he said, looking serious. "What is it?" Aaron asked. "Your body refinement techniques aren't good enough." "Not good enough?" Aaron frowned thoughtfully. Seeing Darkfire's rapid progress, he had already begun to suspect that there was a problem with his own techniques, and it seemed Darkfire had the same thought. "Your techniques? They're too wasteful," Darkfire said. "Most of the natural energy you consume is squandered. With how many natural treasures you consume, you should be 10 times as strong by now." Suddenly, Aaron understood. His techniques had been created by Lord Jiang, who seemed to have an endless supply of precious natural treasures. Rather than using the natural essence in them efficiently, the man simply consumed more of them. "You have better techniques?" Aaron asked, curious to see if he could learn something useful. "I do, but..." Darkfire hesitated. "They're society secrets. The punishment for sharing them with outsiders is death." Slightly disappointed, Aaron nodded. "Nothing we can do about it, then. I'll just have to wait until after we're recruited." Darkfire remained silent for a second or two. "To hell with it," he said finally. "I'll teach you. Just don't let anyone know about it." "Are you sure?" Aaron asked uncertainly. "I don't mind waiting." "You can't wait," Darkfire replied. 9 out of every 10 recruits die in their first year beyond the border. We need every advantage we can get." With that, Darkfire deemed the issue settled. In the weeks that followed, he began to teach Aaron his body refinement techniques, which turned out to be wholly different from Lord Zhang's. Initially, Aaron had some trouble with the new techniques. The ones he knew relied on consuming copious amounts of natural treasures, yet the techniques Darkfire now taught him seemed to be centered around slowly drawing natural essence from the outside world, then thoroughly absorbing even the slightest shred of tea. Even if the principles were the same, circulating natural essence around his body and directing it to his muscles, bones, and organs, Darkfire's techniques required far more care and control. Yet after just some weeks, the training began to have an effect. Even if Aaron was far from mastering the techniques, he sensed that he was already absorbing far more of the natural essence in the food and wine than he had previously. As a result, his strength increased far more rapidly than before. And although Darkfire still held a slight advantage in their sparring matches, Aaron was once again able to keep up with him. Consumed as they were with training, Aaron and Darkfire barely noticed the days pass. Even if much of their time was spent walking through the endless plains and hills that lay before the mountains, their real attention was on the mornings and evenings, when they would train and spar. After some months of travel, they were almost surprised when they reached their destination, a vast city named Hillfort, just a few days' travel from the entrance to the 6th Valley. At a glance, Aaron could see that it was several times the size of Aramont, with countless thousands of buildings centered around a large, barren hill that rose above the rest of the city. Atop it stood not a fort but what looked to be a palace, and Aaron could only guess that the fort for which the city was named had been taken down long ago. The city had no walls, but then, it didn't seem to need any. Just its sheer size and the proximity of the Sixth Valley should be all the protection it required. I think this is it, Aaron said, feeling overwhelmed at the city's size. Any idea where we should go? Darkfire shrugged, looking as bemused as Aaron felt. I suppose we'll just have to take a look.